Hi, my name's Paul Weir. I'm the audio guy from Hello Games, and I'm here at ACM with Paul Welinski from the band 65 Days of Static. And we're going to talk about our brand new album, No Man's Sky Journeys, published by Laced Records.
It's been 8 years in the making. The game's been more than a decade in the making now.
Yeah. Well, the game came out in 2016, and we've been collaborating. I mean, you were at 65 were writing music. 2015?
2014, I think. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a good point. So, remind us how 65 got involved originally with No Man's Sky.
We were just being a band doing our stuff. We got an email from somebody asking if they could use our song Debutante for the launch trailer at, would it have been E3, perhaps? And like we normally do, we asked for a bit of info just to check that we were giving our music to something cool. We got sent across a load of the concept art for No Man's Sky and the sort of description of what the game was going to be. And it was immediately like, oh wow, this concept art's amazing. This is a really good idea. So we said, you can use our song. It was a song called Debutante from We Were Exploding Anyway. Like, yeah, we can use that. And have you got anyone to do the soundtrack yet? Because if not, it'd be great to chat about it. Because we were at the time we were really wanting to sort of hustle our way into doing more scores, and you were all still at a stage where it was all a bit open. So we came and I think eventually we met you and Sean somewhere in London 6 months later and had a chat about it all. And the brief was like suspiciously open. It was just like, don't try and write a soundtrack, just write a 65 Days of Static record. Like, do the thing that you do and it'll be fine. And then like, oh, and by the way, once you've got all of those songs, I'm going to turn it into this infinitely long generative soundscape. But you don't have to worry about that. You just write some songs.
So that is a weird approach. Because I've felt like you're a band, don't force a band to not be a band, because that's the sound that obviously Sean loves and wanted. And I think we were super lucky because obviously you are all, and you in particular, very technical. So we could have ended up with a band who were like, don't talk to us about, we don't understand, like, what is this process? But you guys really, I think, not only understood it, but were excited by the concept of writing an album as one entity and then writing some kind of dynamic, interactive soundtrack as another thing and making that flow. Yeah,
because we've always been into the idea of finding new ways to write music, but also new ways to present music. And I do see, like, I was at a conference the other month with some games composers, and it does seem like quite a range. There's like a lot of very successful composers who only do games, but it seems like they write some music and then move on to the next project. And then there's a whole other team of people implementing it and chopping it up and making it dynamic. And I mean, that's fine if games work that way. But for me personally, the idea of, like, I want to see it through. And the idea of actually not just chopping up music that's been written as a linear thing, but smashing it all together. That's where it gets interesting. And
so we'll show in a second. We'll show an example of how that was done, and how you took those linear album tracks and had in mind that it was going to be implemented in a completely different way, and we had to create some technology to do that. And the background to this is that you wrote the original album, which was a double album of like regular tracks and more soundscapey tracks. But after the game release by 2017, you were then asked, 65 was asked to write a whole series more of soundscapes. And that forms the basis of this new album. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and it's like, in a sense, the opposite way around, because the first record, we wrote it as songs and then disintegrated those songs and turned them into this generative infinity. But by the time we wrote these second soundscapes, we knew how to write generative systems, and because they were only ever intended to exist in the game as these endless things, it was really quite freeing because we didn't have to think about writing them as fixed songs. So we did it a different way. We went, they emerged as soundscapes. So now with this new record, it was like the opposite process of starting with the infinite generative everything and turning them into intentional song structures. We were quite isolated when we wrote that first record. We were up in Sheffield. We just did our thing like we normally would and made loads of music. If I remember correctly, we just Dropboxed you like many hundreds of WAV files, and you actually put it together. And you had a system called Pulse, I believe, that you can show us.
Yeah, so that was a fun experience, because I remember taking the train up and down from Sheffield and like just typing in values like for hours on the train. It kept me busy. But we built this custom tool, it's called Pulse, which basically hoovers in like the individual WAV files that 65 created, which I can show you here. Like this is an example of one particular drone, and we can preview it and it will play the audio. But the point is that we can then assign those files onto a soundscape, and we can put some logic. So you can see if I click on the piano, we have certain behaviors on the piano, and that will only play, in this case, on a planet if you reach a certain like threshold, which we've set in the game. So it was a really nice way of having this constantly evolving soundscape that always sounded like 65. And it also got around the issue that a lot of this kind of generative playback music, although it's always varying, it kind of feels the same. Like you can slice it at any moment, it kind of feels the same. So we really wanted to force change through the system. And so we looked at hooks in the game, you know, like what your behavior was or what was happening in the game, and used that to drive change. Even something similar to time of day can drive change. And that just gives the player the sensation of like, oh, kind of, I haven't heard this before, I haven't heard this variation before.
For us, it was just, there was like an arbitrary interest level, I think, is what we decided upon. So it's like, write some music, but it might be more or less interesting. And what that means is like to be decided. And so Pulse was like where you decided, I suppose.
Yeah. Yep. And that generated all the metadata, push a button, and it kind of just appears automatically in the game. So when you wrote all those updated soundscapes in 2017, it was like it required no more technical assistance. We literally I just put it in, pushed a button, and then all that music appeared in the game. So it was a really nice, clean solution for us. The music on this album is not just taken directly from the game, right?
Correct. For our side of things, we went back to the original material that we recorded, and when we wrote everything, we were up in our studio in Sheffield. We never had any direct connection to what you were doing. We built all of these. We built our own like generative systems to pre-visualize or pre-audiolize what these things would sound like, because we didn't have the game engine. We didn't archive all of that stuff very well, but we had the recordings. Over this last year, I rebuilt some systems to faithfully recreate the original instructions that we gave you for the game, to drop all of the audio into and to generate the soundscapes again. But unlike the game, where it's all mixed into the sound design of the rest of the game and is technically compressed a little bit, these were like this was designed to re-record the soundscapes at a really high quality, and also like the separate stems, everything was kept separate so it could be mixed properly, and so created a huge bulk of material. And then there was a bit of a creative question about whether like how authentic it would be to turn this material or edit this material into something more song-like, and decided that needed to be done, that we were trying to make a record as like a standalone listening experience. If people want the soundscapes as they are in the game, they can play the game. That's what that is designed for. Or they can go on YouTube, where there's hundreds of hours of soundscapes already uploaded. But what we were doing here was quite deliberately making something for people to listen to, and an album representation of the soundtrack of No Man's Sky. So once we'd recreated the soundscapes at a high quality with all of these stems, we then took those stems and chopped them, edited them, sculpted them, added bits and pieces, took bits away, and like combined everything into songs. It's
interesting because my process was really similar to yours. And the album is literally 50% 65 and 50% me. And same for my tracks. There's some which are very close to the game, but there's others which I've completely remixed, kind of reworked, and sometimes taken the idea of what was in the game and just extrapolated it into like a whole new piece of music, where it's clearly what you're hearing in the game, but it's not the thing that you've heard in the game. It's an interesting question, to be authentic, because it is authentic. It is the No Man's Sky soundtrack. But also, I think we both felt very strongly that it should be really bespoke and handcrafted, properly mixed, properly mastered, gone through the whole process and obviously new artwork and things like that to make it into its own, kind of entity.
Yeah, I always like to say it kind of leans into its form. In the game, it's a dynamic, endless soundscape because that is what is essential to that, the formal aspects of a game and music and its role in a game. But if you're putting out a beautiful, heavyweight double vinyl album, it's a very different thing. For a start, it's finite. You can't put infinite music on a vinyl. You have to make these choices, and what leads from there is the decisions. And I think it's really important, part of this decision making was that even though technically it is 50% our material, 50% your material, we haven't done like a disc each. It's all deliberately sort of woven together to create four sides of journeys, to be a bit cheesy about it, and also all mixed by Dave Sanderson up in Sheffield, who's worked with 65 Days on, I think, almost every album apart from maybe one. But he knows the 65 sound. It's really nice to feed all of your stuff into that pipeline too, and so there was a kind of consistency across the whole thing. So it's not a 65 Days album. It's not a Paul Weir album. It's also not quite a 65 Days Aesthetic and Paul Weir album. It's No Man's Sky. It's the sound of No Man's Sky, I guess.
How did you feel about mixing the tracks up? Because I know for a long time we were almost afraid to ask a question like, how is my music going to sit with you guys? How do you think we ended up with that?
Don't get me wrong, I am a massive control freak. But we're not, to me, this was never a 65 Days Aesthetic album as such. It was turning all of the work we did for No Man's Sky into a No Man's Sky album. And so that sort of by definition didn't belong to me. It was a very collaborative thing from the beginning. You did some strings. You redid some strings on a couple of the 65 tracks in the beginning of this project. It's just a bit more like liquid.
Yeah, it felt nicely collaborative. Like, who am I to be involved with 65?
Well, you're someone who knows how to write strings better than me. So it was like, okay, do that then. Yeah. And
I think also that kind of clearly we have different styles, although we're in the same kind of ballpark, like naturally. But it felt somehow like jumping from 65 to my track. Actually, sometimes the contrast is really nice, and sometimes they're quite complementary. Like it feels like, there's a bit of a flow, and it needs that kind of, almost that pacing kind of works in its favour.
I think it flows really well, but even if there were some clashes, then the reality of No Man's Sky, the game, is you've been putting music into it for the last 8 years plus, and that is what the game sounds like as much as us, and so it works in the game. So
for music, I've contributed, like you said, it's like whatever 8 or 9 years, and it goes all the way up until Worlds Part 2 update from beginning of this year, 2025. So it covers that entire sweep as the game has evolved so dramatically over time. It's important to say one of the motivations of making the album is just the fans, particularly on Reddit, it's amazing the passion they have for the game. And to be honest, even though I'm involved in making the game, I also love the game. And so I felt like it's important to try and collect all this music that we've both written, and give people an opportunity to listen to it. Mm-hmm. Paul, you've got one of your soundscapes, Planet Scraper, with you, and you're going to show the process of going from a generative soundscape through to the linear track for the album.
Correct, yep. So this is what we had at the start of the project. This is the song Planet Scraper. It started off as a Pathfinder soundscape. Here you can see there's hundreds of WAVs for this particular soundscape, and they're either called Planet, Space, or Wanted, because as you know, each soundscape had 3 different states. You could either be on a planet, in space, or wanted was the word that we were using for whether you're in combat or I don't know. It was when we were writing it, it was still sort of undecided what that could be, but it was sort of the high danger state. In the end, it was the sort of high danger state where the drums were, and planet and space tended to be much more ambient mostly. So we had all of these WAVs. This is what we sent to you with instructions to get into the game. But this time round, what I did is I built this system which you can see now and you should be able to hear, which is loaded up with all of those WAVs and the various instructions. So this one you see is at 165 BPM. It's running in like 7/4. It's triggering some things every 4 bars, other things every 2 bars. Some things aren't synced to bars, but it's like between 10 and 20 seconds, things like that. And these are different for every sub soundscape of the bigger soundscape. So there's like a lot of variables. Doing it this way rather than recording directly from the game is meant that it can be like fully uncompressed, high quality audio that is not only getting recorded, but it's getting recorded into multi-track. So if I switch over to live, here in live, you can see the same thing, like it's the same track, and now this is just me having recorded the wanted samples loaded with the wanted metadata that we built to play those loops, and also then planet, which is the planet metadata and audio, and space. And so what's this? This is like almost 30 minutes recording of these 3 states. So like tons of audio for this one soundscape. And then very slowly over the last, what would you say, maybe a year, we've been working on this, more or less, this project. Very slowly, these got turned into fully fledged songs. So this is Reaper, this is like the audio workstation where I would pick and choose from the various soundscapes, put things together. Sometimes instead of the recorded soundscapes, I'd kind of go back to those original WAVs and pick out specific things because I knew exactly what I wanted because I'd spent a long time listening to them. Every now and then I would add in extra things as well because as we were talking about before, like the question of like purity or authenticity wasn't really the right approach, because the only authentic way of listening to these soundscapes as soundscapes is in the game. Because this is a record, it needs to work best as a record, so I need to do what's best for a record, which is to turn these into standalone songs. And so yeah, like if I needed to do more things, if I needed to add some extra sub bass here and there, or you know, smooth out a melody to glue things together, that was fine. And so yeah, and you can hear this is like the 3rd stage, and then these stems would eventually go to our Dave Sanderson, the mix engineer, who would turn them into something sounding a little bit shimmery, and yeah, that's how the songs came together.
Paul, thanks very much for talking to me about the music.
Thank you.
And the album is out now on Laced's website, and you can pre-order the vinyl from there as well. Hope you all enjoy it.